Hello and welcome to the Turtle Tracks podcast. This is your host, Brian Van Hooker, and I am here with Beth Mitchroney, who's worked on cartoons like Ren and Stimpy, Wacky Races, I Am Weasel, but for Turtle fans, she was the writer of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures issues 3 and 4, and she answered a lot of the fan mail back in the day for Turtle Comics and has some stories about the old days at Mirage. So, Beth, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thanks for asking.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. I guess to get started, when did you find your path in cartoons? Did that happen? That started before any involvement with turtles, correct?
Yes. Actually, my real background is in fine art.
Okay.
Watercolor in particular, has always been my love. And I did more of that and graphic arts, graphics, pencils and that. Then I met Kenny and he took a look at what I was doing and said, well, you can do this as well. So he got me into cartooning and, the different kind of cartoon characters. And I saw his Blair books and got a set of my own. And I always recommend anybody who's interested in learning the art, get those Preston Blair books.
Did you find it
And
hard?
it went on from there. Go ahead.
Did you find it hard to jump from watercolors to cartooning? Because it seems like very different ends of the spectrum for art.
It is very different. My mission in my art was to make things look as 3D as possible. The shading and with watercolor is the same kind of thing, the blending. And you have line work in animation and in cartoons. And I still work on that. Fortunately, when I was 10 years old, I found out I could write a news story. And that set me on a career path for a very interesting purpose. If I could get a career, I could get a paycheck. If I could get a paycheck, I could get a horse. Drawing, if I didn't have a horse, I could draw one. Then I had one. And so everything always boils down to horses, which has nothing to do with Ninja Turtles. But that's honestly where it all came from. And a journalism background is the best foundation for any kind of writing that you should be asked to do. Hemingway was a reporter. Mark Twain was a reporter. So when we got the assignment to adapt Robert Asprin's Mythconceptions novel into an 8 comic book series, Kenny looked at me and said, "You've got the job." And I said, "I've never done this." I got mentored by one of the best in the business, the spirit guy himself. And I took his book, Sequential Art, and used that as my guide. And I did 8 scripts in 16 days while holding down a full-time job as a newspaper reporter.
Good
I
God.
had 4 corrections the whole time. So if you tell me you are 3 months behind on your script, that doesn't even compute.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's where the writing part came from. And that's why Pete and Kev had me do 3 and 4.
I'm in journalism. I've been writing for magazines for 12 years now. And I still sometimes find myself shuddering at the term a journalist because I mostly write about cartoons and TV shows and things like that. But it teaches you deadlines and like there's no such thing as writer's block or any of that. You just got to get your shit done. Like there's no
Bingo.
yeah.
Bingo. 5 o'clock's coming.
Yeah.
Don't let that editor look at you with that look. Do
Yeah.
not let him get out of the chair. And what I say about writer's block is that's a vampire you do not allow in your house.
Yeah.
Do not let that vampire cross the door. Does not exist. And some people argue that point, but you can't get that. I once did 17 news stories in one day, and I begged my editor, do not make me do that again.
Oh my gosh. That's something I've never done. That sounds rough.
You don't want to.
No, no. So you guys did
Mythconceptions.
myth I feel like I'm saying it wrong. I mean, I know I'm not. Misconception together, and then
Right.
did Turtles come next, or was that a little bit later?
Turtles came a little later than that. We were also doing Kenny's title Space Arc,
Oh yeah,
which, believe
sure.
it or not, was one of the reasons Pete and Kevin decided to do the Ninja Turtles. They saw Space Arc. Kevin, during the premiere of the first Turtle movie, Kevin mentioned this on stage. They saw Kenny, they saw Space Arc, they said, we can do this. And that's what led to the first Ninja Turtle comic. And so, um, fortunately, down the road, when they wanted to do a more child friendly or young, appeal to the younger set, something less dark, something a little bit more like the animation that they were seeing on TV, they called Kenny and said, "We want you to do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Adventures,"
To be
and
clear,
that's how that happened.
if anybody's not aware, so Ken Mitchroney, who did a lot of art in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures books, and literally is my favorite Ninja Turtles artist ever from even when I was a kid. But that's your husband, and that's the Kenny we're referring to, just so we're aware.
He bought that. Yes, he bought the company. Yes, I am thrilled to be Kenny's wife, and I hope he feels the same way about me being his wife.
I've been friends with Ken
It's
for a
been
few
around
years.
for a while, so I guess it's working.
So anyway, when they needed a more family age friendly book for
Hmm.
Archie comics, they reached out to Ken to do some of the artwork. The first one he did was three, and you adapted the
Right,
scripts for.
because he had other commitments, he couldn't do one and two.
Oh, I didn't know.
So we jumped in on three. Yeah, we
Oh,
jumped in on three
now you had
and
to
had a nice
adapt.
long run.
You had to adapt. So for those who need a refresher, three and four were adaptations of the cartoon episode The Incredible Shrinking Turtles, where the turtles were shrunken by
Hmm.
the magical space crystal
Right.
thing.
Hmm.
I'm curious if you remember what that process was like. Like, did you have to read the script? Did you get the cartoon? What was the process of adapting them? Do you remember? It's been a while, so don't worry if not.
It's been a while. No, because, well, the problem is that I turn scripts out so fast that it just literally flows through my fingers. But yes, I did have to do research. But then, besides doing the research on the cartoon show, which we were fans of, I was thrilled that you could go to a toy store and you could buy, for I think it was $12, you could buy actual cells from the show. I thought that was genius.
Yeah.
And people could have a souvenir of the actual show, because this was back in the days when things weren't done on a Cintiq. They were hand painted cells, and you could own original cartoon art. So you watch, you take notes, and you just open the floodgates and let it flow right through your fingers into this thing we called a typewriter. And and you just let it flow. But another aspect of doing anything with the turtles, whether it was my writing or helping Ken with his art, is I started early on researching ninjas and Japanese martial arts. Because, for instance, let me see if we have anything here that looks like a bow. We don't. This is what I'm going to have to use as a prop, a pencil. You never hold a bow like this. You may hold a bow like this. You may hold a bow like that. You may hold a bow this way, but you never hold it palm up, both hands. Little details like that, I made sure Kenny didn't screw up. There were times when he had interesting poses he needed a turtle to be. Guess who was the model? And so I needed to learn about size. I needed to learn about, okay, Leo doesn't have a katana. Leo is not carrying katanas. Leo is carrying ninja toes. This is our little secret, because they always called it a katana.
Wait, what
Katana
is
is
it?
nice,
Ninja
pretty
what?
curved by a master swordsman. A katana is made by a master swordsman.
Right.
It is a work of art. A ninja toe is done by a blacksmith who is in the black market in the era of when the populace could not have weapons. All of those ninja weapons, for the most part, with the exception of that straight sword, because that was made down, dirty, get them out, and get them out of my blacksmith shop so nobody catches me. All of the other weapons are actually farm tools.
Oh wow. I think I knew that. I knew
Yes.
nunchucks were. I didn't know about the
Mhm.
rest.
That not the nunchaku or nunchuck is a rice flail, and it's used to beat the grain apart from the chaff. And you'll notice that there is that string between,
Yeah.
sometimes they draw a chain, but that string that was attaching the two rods is made out of something that a samurai sword cannot cut. You take
Ah,
finely braided horsehair tail and a lot of strands of horsehair tail, twisted into cord, and a samurai sword cannot cut that.
I feel like this
And
conversation the horses a lot.
oh well, everything always ends up horses, but that
That's
happens
great.
to be but that happens to be
I
true.
didn't know
The
that. That's interesting.
size, the size are a three-prong gardening tool,
Right.
and the staff, the bow, that is a walking staff. The han bow of martial arts is simply the half bow. It would be like a cane without a crook. So all of the implements used by the Ninja Turtles, because at that time only samurai could have real weapons. The kama that the Ninja Turtles don't use, that was simply a scythe for cutting grain, and then they turned it into a weapon. So yeah,
Or size?
kama, the kama,
No,
or
size.
which the
Sharp
scythe? No, they're
or
not.
no?
They're pointed. They're more for grabbing and turning.
Right.
And then, but if you were to take that long center prong and push, yeah, you could do some damage.
I'm sure you'd hurt somebody, right?
Yeah. I never was good with size. The first thing you have to learn is how to turn it so that the handle goes out, and then turn it so that the points go out. I was very lucky. All I had to do was, pose.
So you were
Never had
modeling
to use
all
it
these
either.
ninja weapons as Ken was drawing them.
Right. But I had to learn how you use them properly.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Now, now there is one thing that looked really cool in the first Ninja Turtle movie, which I did not work on, but that was when you see Shredder for the first time and he lands, and then he takes his bow and twirls it over the back of his hand.
Yeah.
So I got a really good bow and I learned to do that. And I realized that is stupid because you've just as it goes beautifully behind your hand, you let go your weapon. It is totally out of your control, and somebody
Sure.
could go boink, and then my shredder next. And so that was something interesting. But man, it does look cool when you do it.
So rewinding a little bit. So you guys, Eastman and Laird were fans of Ken, so they reached out when they needed a family-friendly book. Did
Right?
you guys go meet them or something? Like, did you guys go to North?
Lots.
Okay.
I met them. We met them, and I met them before we were even associated with them work-wise. We
Oh,
met them in Columbus, Georgia. I believe that's where it was, but it was a smaller convention. And we got to meet them and hang out with them. And I took one look at the first issue comic. And I told Kenny I want 15 copies because I got a feeling about this. I got a feeling about this. Last time I had that feeling, 1963, just to let you know how old I am. 1963, I'm in Graham, Texas, listening to the only radio station we had, and they played a new record by these four guys out of England. And I heard that record, and I said, if they can do that twice in a row, American music is in a lot of trouble.
sure.
And it was. And I had the same feeling about the Ninja Turtles. And we did not buy 15 copies of issue one, but we
Oh,
did manage to, down the road, we managed to work for them. And so we caught the coattails when we did.
oh my God! If he'd listened to you, you'd have a mansion.
Okay, all you wise, don't say I told you so. It doesn't help. Just let her go. Let her go. It's all
Oh,
fun.
15.
So, yeah.
So, what would you? Here's a question for you. Back in the day,
Yeah.
what was Peter Laird like back then?
Pete and Kevin, from the get go, have been two of the nicest people I've ever met. And that is still holding on today.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, Pete is just, I mean, sweet and generous. He was driving an old red Datsun pickup truck for the longest time. They didn't ever want to leave. He didn't want to leave Northampton. But this is typical of Pete. They finally went and they bought some property, and there are places in Northampton that's really, really lumpy. And he realized that his pickup truck didn't have the four-wheel drive capabilities that he needed. So he bought a Humvee. And Kenny drove up one time and said, well, I guess every boy needs a military vehicle sitting in your front yard. And this is not a Hummer. This is a Humvee made with a plaque in it that says, made for Peter Laird by General Motors. And I got
Wow,
to
I
drive
didn't know
that
that.
thing. I got to drive that thing. And that was after riding on Pete's motorcycle, which is a whole nother story about the motorcycle trips, which I hope we get into.
Oh my gosh.
But I got to drive that thing, and then he took over and he was heading straight for a pine tree. And I'm sitting there, you go, Pete, tree, Pete, tree. Yeah, watch this. Down that tree went like it was a blade of grass. And he just laughed, and I did too. Pete is wonderful. He's let us stay at his guest room. I stole some of his, well, he said it was okay. Some of his strawberries that they had growing. They didn't have very much that year. Um, we, I got to see some early computer work before everybody else was doing computer work, because Pete was totally into. Pete is Donatella. You want to know who Donatella is? That's Peter Laird. You want to know Raphael? Go see Kev. That's that's them. But Pete let me see the first costume that was used in the first movie, the first Donatella costume, lounging around in his house like Donnie belonged there, which he did. And that was awesome. That was just an awesome, wonderful visit. Kev, this meant a lot to me. Journalism, print reporting is in a lot of trouble.
Oh
There's
my
no two
gosh.
ways about it. It's
Yeah.
in a lot of trouble. I managed to get, I'd had a hiatus in my career, in part because I ran Kenny's cartoon studio, and in part because once we got to California, nobody was hiring. I did write for magazines as well, but my heart's in print journalism, newspaper work, those hot, heavy deadlines, those city council meetings, the fall of DC Solar, all sorts of issues I've covered. And I finally landed a job. And Kev sent me an original Donatella because he knew I also loved Donnie. And he did a sketch of Donatella for me. And this past year, Pete had signed one of my favorite T-shirts that they had designed, Master Splinter. I also love Master Splinter. It was Master Splinter, and Donnie was on that. And Pete put a Donatella on one side, and this past year, Kev put Raphael on the other. So now the shirt is complete.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
So yeah, they are the nicest guys you'll ever meet. They gave us fabulous opportunities. Every good thing that happens to them, I am grateful for, because they deserve it all. They've made so many people happy. They
Oh
do
yeah.
something really interesting. Across generations, people love turtles. You can argue whether you like Mikey or you like Donnie or you like Leo or Raphael. And brothers and sisters do. But Pete and Kev bridged so many things that divide the country right now. They did it with four turtles and a rat.
Yeah.
And I love him for it. I love him for it.
I mean, you were talking about like that feeling you got with the Beatles and then them, and really, when you guys were doing the turtle stuff, it kind of had their own Beatlemania kind of thing in that day. Like everything was turtles.
Yeah.
It was like
You could see that in the fan mail. You could see that in the fan mail.
Let's get into that. So
And
what was your capacity in answering the fan mail? So this is audio.
that,
So I'm gonna.
oh, this is audio only.
It is.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, then
but
you
I'm
won't
interested.
see
So
the
show me.
illustration. Okay, I'll show you. Okay,
That's cool to
this
me.
is what we printed and sent out.
Okay, it's a little card.
And
Okay.
it's a green card about the size of a postcard. And it was of Kenny's art. And we would, all I really had to do was sign a turtle name to it or Master Splinter's name and send it out. And that would have been fine. Everybody would have been happy with it. We got boxes of letters. I didn't do that. If you asked for how to draw a turtle, there's not much space on here. There's just enough space for the address for the kid. So in every other piece of the postcard, you've got to do a quick illustration
Sure.
of how to draw a turtle. We talked about how to use the weapons, and I would explain to them, don't do this, but this is how they're used. And all sorts of questions they would ask. And I would research, I would ask the guys whatever it needed to, whatever I needed to know or do so that we could, and I wrote in the margins, I wrote all around. We had to draw a box so that they would know where the address was and enough room for the stamp, and everything else was fair game for me. I learned how to write Master Splinter in Japanese.
Oh, wow.
So I would write it in Japanese underneath the English name. I would use, if it was something I could do quickly, I would use colored markers, the appropriate color for the turtle that they were writing to. And you learned a lot about the audience. And one of the ones that really hit my heart was a young boy out of Australia was begging the turtles to come to Australia and stop the deforestation of the rainforest. And that was hard. But it taught me that children are very aware. Children seek help because children know they don't have the power to fix things yet. But it really taught me a lot. Another thing that's not related to the fan club, but is related to children. Some people were talking about the violence of the Ninja Turtles. And I decided, well, let's go to typical audience. There were 3 boys who were children of folks that owned businesses in the downtown DeLand area where we had our cartoon studio. They came up to see Kenny. Kenny happened to be out of town. So I took the opportunity to say, okay, I need for you to tell me what you think of the violence or action in the Ninja Turtles and compare that to other things and what is appropriate for your age group. And these are 10 and 11-year-olds. And what is not. Threw that at them, sat down, shut up, and for 2 hours listened to them debate it all and watched them substantiate their claims. They came to the logical conclusion that the animated Ninja Turtles and the cartoons and the comic books were fine. RoboCop, way too much, and they shouldn't have gone. But Kenner was marketing to them, and so they thought it would be appropriate to go.
Sure.
So I just sat back and I learned a lot about self-censorship and what is appropriate for the audiences that we primarily were drawing for, although we know we had older audiences too. So we did not want to talk down to anyone.
How did you end up in being the one to respond to the fan mail?
Pete and Kev.
They just
Mirage, either that or else it was Cheryl and Jim Prendle who were running the business end of Mirage, but it was straight out of Mirage.
Got it.
Straight out of Mirage.
How long did you do that for? Do you recall? Like
years, a few years, several years. Yeah.
I know Ken did the book for he would do the book for a chunk of issues, then he wouldn't, then he'd be back.
Right, because of other things going on in his career, animation and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually why he had to step away from the book, because his animation career was finally getting to the point we couldn't meet a deadline, or we were in danger of not meeting a deadline. We always met deadline. We never failed. We sometimes were filling out the FedEx form and finishing up the last bit of art on the hood of the FedEx truck. Sometimes we knew we weren't going to make that deadline. We'd have to drive it to the airport in Orlando, but
Oh.
we always made deadlines.
And you had to send everything to Northampton, I assume?
Northampton, yeah. Yeah. We sent everything back to the guys.
Cool. Who did you guys report to? Was it Ken and them directly, or was it like Berger or somebody? Because I know there was like
We basically reported to the Pringles for the business end and Pete and Kev for the other part of it. And it was through them that it would go to Archie.
Got it.
Yeah, it was mostly through Mirage Studios, which is why is an interesting thing about that, about the that motorcycle trip to San Diego Comic Con, which you may have heard about.
I did. Ken told me a little bit about this, but let's get into it. This was, do you remember what year this was?
I was trying to remember.
Yes.
It was in the 80s, and I don't remember the actual year.
Was the movie out yet?
No.
Okay,
No,
so maybe it was
no.
88, 89, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was May. I think it was earlier, actually. But anyway,
wow.
So Pete has always loved motorcycles. He has had a fabulous collection. Kenny went up one time and Pete challenged Kenny, look through this array and find the Triumph. So Kenny looked down to the floor, found where the cat food can was that was going to collect the oil, because Triumphs are notorious for leaking oil. So he spotted the Triumph right away, and that meant Kenny was a motorcycle guy. So Pete resonated with Kenny on that level as well. So Pete wanted to take as many of the folks from Mirage Studios to Comic Con on a motorcycle ride. And so he took Kenny to some motorcycle shops up there, and Kenny realized what he wanted was a Honda Shadow. So Kenny came back down to Florida, bought the Shadow, and in a single day took the safety course, got his certification, left that night in a blinding Florida rainstorm. And when I say blinding Florida rainstorm, if you don't know those, the sky is white as a sheet of paper.
Good Lord.
There is no lightning. The sky is white. You know the storm is subsiding when the sky starts flashing patches of dark. And he was riding from Daytona all the way to the Panhandle in Tallahassee in that storm. That was the first event, and he had just gotten his certification. So trial by fire. Well, that wasn't the hard part. The hard part is this was pre-cell phone. This was pre-GPS. So we got a bunch coming down from Northampton, Massachusetts. Ended up being about 4 or 5 guys. Some of the others just didn't quite make it. One guy's got something in his eye and he realized he couldn't make the trip. But anyway, Pete, Ed the Rain God, we don't even remember his last name, but he was Ed the Rain God, because if you put him up front, there was no rain. You let him ride in the pack, rain. So Ed the Rain God, he took care of the motorcycles. I think Lawson.
I said Lawson.
I think Chris Farley was also in that, but it was definitely Pete and Kenny were involved in that, and
Kevin
Kenny's
too,
got
right?
lots
No.
of adventures. Huh?
Kevin too?
No, not Kevin. Not Kevin on this, but Pete. Yeah, it was Pete. And so they went out. They were leaving Northampton, Massachusetts. Kenny's leaving from west of the Daytona Beach, Florida area, where we lived in DeLand, and they had to meet up somewhere in the United States before they got to California. So I was running Kenny's studio at the time. I stayed on the phone and by the phone, notebooks, maps. Remember paper maps? Remember atlases? Yes, we had those. And with this primitive setup that we thought was really cool and modern, I would wait and Pete would call in from, I guess, a payphone. And so this does take you back. So from a payphone, he would call. He was on this street, on this highway, in this city, in this state. And I would wait, and this is where he would be for the next 2 hours. And I would wait for Kenny. And Kenny would give me the same information. And I kept tracking them all until some town in Ohio. We got them on the same street. They saw each other.
Ah,
And then my part of the job was done. Now I did not go on that ride. I did go on one when Pete decided we all needed to go to Loudon, New Hampshire to watch Dale Quarterly race motorcycles, because at the time Dale was being sponsored by the Ninja Turtles. And so his fire suit and everything had Ninja Turtles all over it.
oh, wow.
So, yeah, so I think it was Pete. I'm trying to remember who all was with us. It might have been Craig and Jim along with us, but definitely Kenny. And I got to ride on the back because at that time I did not have my motorcycle certification. Corrected that. And so I rode on the back with Kenny, and we went down to Loudon and we got to watch Dale race. Dale eventually took a break in between races, pulled down his fire suit, and his chest was covered in scars. And Kenny was remarking on that. And Dale said, "Those aren't scars. Those are stories. Pick one. I'll tell it to you." So Kenny picked a rather significant one that was on Dale's shoulder. And so Dale told him about the day he nearly met Elvis. And that was when the bike went one way, but then started chasing him as it was sliding. Dale rolled and went another way, and they both were heading to the wall. Obviously, they survived. But like he said, "Oh, yeah, I nearly saw Elvis that day." But it was a wonderful ride. And so I am a minor part of the Digital Demons set. I got my shirt, and that was a lot of fun.
For clarity, what are the Digital Demons? I know, but let's
Digital Demons, because Pete's really involved in computers and was very far ahead of the game at the time. It was the Digital Demons. It was just a little logo of a motorcycle, and that he designed on computer, I guess. But that's what he called the set that went out to San Diego Comic-Con.
It's remarkable how much he really was ahead of it. I don't know if you know this. So they did a story recently called The Last Ronin, and it was
yes,
about the last surviving Ninja Turtle. And it was a story that Kevin and Pete had sketched out back in, say, 87. It was 87.
Right. Yeah.
I got to write the official history of it, and I was interviewing Kevin about it. And he was talking about how these little, literally drawings of cell phones before cell phones were really a thing that he had done. He was so far ahead of the game back in 87. He really knew. He was really an advanced dude technologically.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There were people. I mean, I know everybody talks about Steve Jobs, but Steve Jobs wasn't the only one. We're also heavily involved in the legacy of Ed Big Daddy Roth, who created Ratfink, and a bunch of amazing custom cars. Once he found fiberglass, it was Katie bar the door. Here comes Ed. And he realized he didn't have to work in metal anymore. He could shape it any way he wanted. And Ed was another one. Ed actually came up with a flying car. If anybody had backed it, we wouldn't have traffic jams. We would have air collisions, but not the traffic jams. He was working on solar cars that would really work, unlike the one that Cal Berkeley has worked on that can't get up turn 2 and 3 over at Sonoma Raceway. It's a nice idea, but the solar car, if it can't handle turn 2 and 3, it can't handle the Berkeley Hills. But we have in our midst amazing thinkers, and definitely Pete's one of them. Pete and Kev, because look what they did with the Turtles.
Oh my gosh,
it's amazing. I mean, look what Pete did with taking a guillotine idea and made it so that you could cut a bagel without cutting your finger. That was wonderful.
So you guys obviously did the work. So the letters, were they mailed to Florida when the Turtle fan mail?
Yeah, in boxes. And when we'd send them out. Yeah, we'd send them out. We printed up the cards to make it easier.
I'm sorry, Gay. So say again.
Oh, we just printed up the cards to make it easier.
Sure.
It's just that I needed more space to write.
Was it always the same artwork, or was it different artwork on the fronts of it?
No, it's the same artwork.
Same artwork. That's one of
Yeah.
Ken's covers. I can't remember which number it
Yeah,
was.
it's one of Ken's covers. I don't remember which one it was either because he took that part off. I'll have to ask him. But yeah,
Let me see it
they
again.
got
I remember which one it was. Oh,
let me see if I can get this up. Can you see
yeah, it's Worms on the cover fighting
the
Scumbug against
worm?
all the turtles, but I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember which number that
Yeah.
is. I'm sure there
Uh,
are people in the audience who know. So
Screaming the number right now and asking why I don't remember that.
yeah,
Sorry.
that's exactly it. Because
My fault.
I'm not
Oh
great at memorizing issue numbers and things like that, but there are fans who certainly are. Um,
yeah.
did you guys ever work in the Northampton offices at all when you were up there?
We would go up there mostly for meetings.
Sure,
And this, okay, here's another sweet story about Pete and Kev.
sure.
Kenny is a seriously major cellular level Baltimore Orioles fan. He grew up when they were winning World Series every other year. Brooks Robinson was his hero, and we actually got to meet and become friends with Brooks Robinson, which delighted Kenny no end. Another nice hero. Um, and so they would schedule the meetings so that we could attend home games at Camden Yards.
Oh wow, that's cool.
We would drive up, we would drive up and stop at the Holiday Inn in Baltimore, and we would be able to see the games and then go up, attend the meetings, turn around, go back to Baltimore, more games, and then we'd go home to Florida.
What kind of meetings were they?
Um, Talking about, different plans. Sometimes we found out about merchandising.
Sure.
Also found out some of the merchandising that was told, there's no way, you weren't really thinking when you did that. Um, Sometimes it was just touching base. Sometimes it was larger meetings involving art, independent artists from other titles too, because the Ninja Turtles came up along with Space Ark, along with Myth Conceptions and Elf Quest. Let's not forget Elf Quest.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of major independent titles were coming on the scene at that time.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. I don't know whether you call it the golden age of independent titles, but it was when independent titles were really taking on DC and Marvel and literally taking them on, and in many cases outdoing them. And so sometimes the independent creators needed to get together for a forum to discuss distribution and other things. And so Kenny would go to those more often than I would, but yes, he definitely would be attending those meetings.
I know Pete and Kevin did a lot to support independent artists, with
Amazing work, amazing work.
yeah, really
They
just
had
yeah.
they had the clout to do it, and they did it. It was important, very important.
Anybody else from Mirage Studios leave an impression with you? I know there's a few characters up there. I'm just curious who stood out to you.
I I really, since I worked more with Pete and Kev, they definitely were there. But Jim and Cheryl Trindle, who ran the business were not just business people. We have lost Cheryl, and that was really, really sad. She had some physical disabilities that she ignored and got the work done.
Hmm.
She never let anything stand in her way. And if you were smart, you stayed out of her way. In terms of don't think just because, and this was the era, don't think just because she's a woman, don't think that because she had some physical disabilities that you could walk all over her, because she would explain in that lovely West Virginia accent that perhaps that might not be your best strategy. She was protective of the studio in the best of ways. Mama hen protective, not vicious or anything, but it was a protection you get out of love. Jim Prindle watching out for their interests.
Hmm.
He was as conscientious about protecting the rights and royalties of Ninja Turtles that in a less polite way, um, upon occasion, the um, Disney stable of lawyers protect the Disney rights. And if you have ever drawn a Mickey Mouse when you shouldn't have, you will find out that they will have a discussion with you.
Sure.
Well, Jim protected their rights in the same way, but that was just one person doing that. But he
Oh.
was very conscientious about it. There was a little old lady who handmade Ninja Turtle yarmulkes. She's the only one that got a pass. She's the only one that got a pass. But how would you mess with a sweet little old lady making
I mean,
Ninja Turtle
Disney would have
yarmulkes?
crushed her like a
So
bug.
you crushed her. I have seen Disney go after daycare centers
Yeah.
and not giving them 30 days to paint something else on there.
Sure.
It's yeah, no, slammed like a bug.
I did
No,
not know about the little old lady who did turtle yarmulkes. That's great.
oh, it was one of those adorable things. Um, the Bodets and more Molly, because Molly and I both belly dance. And so we did an impromptu belly dance up there one time.
Oh my God.
Um, oh yeah, yes. I was there for the fun times. I totally was there for the fun times.
Oh,
And I
that's lovely.
absolutely love the association. I still love the association that I had with them.
We're
And it,
zigzagging around a little bit. But back to the fan mail real quick. I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up a particular fan who you wrote to a few times. So it's a mutual friend of Ken and mine named Kyle Carosa. He's a creator of Mighty Magiswords, and he's a very accomplished cartoon maker now. But I know that he ended up in the back issues. In the backs, some of his artwork ended up in the back of a handful of Ninja Turtles Adventures comics. But you also corresponded with him a
right.
number of times, correct?
Yes, he still has the cards.
Yeah.
Now, Kyle's kind of interesting. Kyle and Kenny started working on Fanboy and Chum Chum. Kenny was a director on some of those episodes, and Kyle was part of his team. And Kenny mentored Kyle and some of the others who were not always getting the kind of support that they might need to keep their career going.
Hmm.
Animation is, the phrase, may you live in interesting times. Animation is a very interesting industry. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get somebody like Kenny who takes a look at you and says, you've got talent. Let me help you focus in the direction that will let you shine.
Hmm.
And Kenny took Kyle on and helped him shine. And Kyle then, in turn, sold a series idea, and that was Mighty Magiswords. And there was a little delay in getting Kenny hired on Mighty Magiswords, but Kenny got to do voices as well as some character designs and other things, as well as storyboards. And what do I mean storyboards? No, he was running the storyboard unit, and he had to deal again with some folks, but because of what he did with Kyle, Kyle knew that this new talent would be able to shine with Kenny backing them up and moving them forward. So yeah, I don't know why I said Kenny did storyboards. Kenny was one of the heads of the department, but Kenny had to work hand in glove with Kyle on that, and it was a while before Kyle connected the fan mail with us.
Oh,
Well, it's not like I signed my name.
right. Oh, sure. You signed the turtles' names.
Yes, I always signed the turtles' names.
Oh, wow.
And I haven't seen his card, so I'm sorry, I don't remember. There was so much mail, but I don't remember what I wrote to him. But I'm so thrilled to know that someone that we know
Yeah.
got touched by that way back when. And we do hear a lot of stories from kids who would collect the comics at hard times in their lives. Either the family didn't have money, the family was breaking up, they were moving and going to a new place that just wasn't accepting them, or other trials in their lives. And these are kids, and it's hard. And they found solace in the Ninja Turtle adventures. That took them away from all that. And people forget that going on adventures with folks like Ninja Turtles get you away in a good way. Get you away in a good way.
I mean, that was the case
And
for me.
people,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah.
you're going off on an adventure. Your day-to-day problems, you can just kind of set them aside for a while. Kenny's reading Doc Savage right now, and it is such a delight, such an adventure. And you realize you're you're going somewhere completely different, and you're going to have fun for a while. It's the basis of the movie Sullivan's Travels, a guy who wants to make serious, important movies, not realizing that what's really important is to keep people entertained. And the Ninja Turtles did that, and we helped.
I'm regretting that I don't know. I can't remember which artist it was because I do interview a lot of people.
I
One
understand.
was that? Yeah.
I understand completely.
Oh yeah. But one of the artists I spoke to recently, who's doing work for IDW, one of the Ninja Turtle books, had their artwork in one of the back, like Kyle had the artwork in the back of the issue of one of the comics.
Yes,
I bet you he got one of those cards too. I just don't remember the artist's
may
name.
have.
I'll get back to you.
But I love that they did that.
Yeah.
Isn't that special? There's a lot of talk about people not hearing other people. And Mirage heard through the Archie comics. Mirage heard the fans, and they gave the fans, there wasn't enough space to put all the fan art, but they gave the fans the opportunity to be part of something they loved
Oh yeah.
by including the art in the back. That's just Katie Keene did that back when I was a kid. Katie Keene was a female lead comic book, and she would wear high fashions. And Katie Keene encouraged readers to draw fashions and send those clothes, the drawings of those clothing in, and they would sometimes use them, and you would get credit in the small section of the frame of the comic book. And to carry on that sort of thing, to get the reader base involved that way and see your own art in that comic book that you love so much.
Yeah.
That makes you part of it.
Oh
You're
yeah.
invested. You are invested like you weren't before. And I love it. I love it. You are part of Ninja Turtle history by having your art in the back of the book.
Absolutely. Um, I understand you were at the premiere of the Ninja Turtles movie. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. The one up in Northampton, Massachusetts.
So
That
where
was
was that? So
fun.
there's not in Northampton?
It was in Northampton, Massachusetts. This
Okay.
was specially done by Pete and Kev because of how much they owe to Northampton.
Sure.
And they really they rented out the theater. I got to ride in a limousine. At the
Ah,
end of the day, Kenny and I were able to get in the limousine and say, "Days in, please," because that's where we were staying at the time. But it was a wonderful event. My personal, if you really want to warm my heart, you praise my husband on the stage. And they did that. And that was sweet. But I loved watching them tell some of the stories of what it took to get that first comic book out there. And the fact that when the movie came out, they had not realized that the Ninja Turtles would go anywhere near that length of time.
sure.
I talked to Pete in '88, and he was still shaking his head. Who knew they would be around this long? They're still here.
40
The
years?
movies are still coming out.
This is the
I
40th
love
anniversary
it.
this year. This is the
We
40th
got
anniversary.
the 40th anniversary. Who knew
Yeah.
40 years later? This is like the Rolling Stones saying, no, I want to quit this when I'm 40. No, you don't. Yeah, 80 maybe, but I don't think Mick's going to quit. But it's the same kind of thing. The Ninja Turtles are still out there, and they're
Yeah.
still relevant, and they're still saying things, and they're still entertaining.
You mentioned that first issue again. What was it about that first comic when you saw it for the first time that made you think this is something special?
I actually thought I got to be part of the ride.
Hmm.
I knew it was special with issue one,
Sure.
the issue one of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. First of all, the name. If you know nothing about it, first of all, the name tells you everything.
Yeah.
They're teenagers. Okay, you know they're not going to be wise old hermits. Mutant. Okay, something happened. We got to find out what happened.
Sure.
Something happened. So, some weird happened here. Either they got mutated or they mutated from the egg on. Something happened. So you
Sure.
got to find out what happened. So now you're hooked. Ninja, well, as I understand, the creation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was Pete and Kev, who were roommates at the time, earning minimum wage job type things, roomies, and they were watching martial arts movies or some kind of movie late at night, having pizza, drawing pictures. What's really, really cool? Oh, ninjas are cool. You're dead before you even know they're in the room, and they're out before anybody knew they were there. All that kind of stuff that ninjas are. And so, draw, draw, draw. Okay, what's klutzy? Well, turtles are klutzy. They roll over on their backs. They can't get up, and then they die. They can't even roll back onto their feet if they roll over on their backs. That's pretty klutzy. And next thing you know, we had 4 Ninja Turtles, and as I understand it, they had that, but they didn't really have an antagonist to go after until somebody was washing dishes and had one of those 4-sided cheese graters, put his hand in it, grabbed the handle, was cleaning it, and realized, Shredder. And that if you look at Shredder's armbands with those claws on it, that as I understand it, that's the inspiration of that. So you hear stories like that at the movie premiere, but you hear the name Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Yeah.
How can turtles be ninjas? Well, you got to find that out, don't you? How can you not buy that? How can you? Why? We didn't buy 15 copies, but I mean, why do you don't buy at least one to find out how in the world did these characters come about? Because you know that the adventure is going to happen. You know it's going to happen. You know it's going to be fun. And Pete and Kev did not disappoint. They set you up and they bowled you over.
I've talked about this with
And
a
they
lot of
kept
people.
you entertained for decades.
I've talked about this with a lot of people. Like I grew up with the Turtles, right? I don't remember a time before I was a Turtle fan. Um, but like, if you grow up with that title, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it seems normal to you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a goofy title. It's strange, and I think that's so key to its success. And that like we grew up with it, so it seems normal to us. But if you came into it as somebody who realized what a strange title it is, it definitely stood out, and I think is a huge part of the reason for its success.
I totally concur. I
Yeah,
totally concur because if they had had a lesser name,
yeah.
I don't think the comic would have sold as well. The name totally nailed it.
I think that and
Totally nailed
the
and
four
set the tone for everything that they did.
totally. I think that and the fact that like the four personality types that they nailed that they landed on made it so that everybody in the audience had somebody they saw themselves in.
Right.
And,
Particularly once they got into the cartoon
yes.
and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle adventures.
Yeah, because
As
they have more
somebody once
personality.
said, you can tell which turtle Kenny has drawn without seeing any color on it or seeing the weapon.
Oh yeah.
People can look at Kenny's turtles and they will know which turtle that is. But we followed a younger brother and an older brother who were arguing about which was the cooler turtle. And obviously, one identified with one, another identified with
Yeah.
another. Kenny loves Raphael. Sorry. Kenny loves Raphael. I love Donatella. We have friends who love Leonardo. We have friends who love Mikey. And you can almost tell by the personality types of our friends which turtle they're going to like.
Sure. Okay.
Because, yeah, you lock into your turtle.
Oh
That's
yeah.
your turtle. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've been a Donatello guy since forever.
Oh
So
yeah.
I know.
Oh, I love him. I love him. I love it.
I
That's why I
understand.
had to learn the staff. That's why it was
Yeah,
so important to me that you never draw the staff held incorrect because I'll tell them.
I understand this is a story about a pinball machine arriving on a out of nowhere one day.
Oh yes, totally, totally, totally.
I'm curious about this before
Well,
we
we
go.
were okay. We had a cartoon studio in downtown DeLand, which is a lovely north central Florida town. It's the downtown now has won some awards for being one of the best downtowns in America. But at the time, we had this on the second story over a florist shop, and we were doing everything from the Ninja Turtle comics to we did animation for Disney and Universal. We did the season opener of um, Back to the Future there. We worked on Gargoyles and Maniacs. We worked on all sorts of things up there. And we inked Ed Big Daddy Roth's pencils. And we did all sorts of stuff up there. And we were always busy and we were always on deadline. And so it was fast, furious, keep it going, keep it light, keep it fun, but keep that deadline. And all of a sudden, some guy said, "You got to sign for this downstairs." And I'm going, "Sign for what?" And you got to hurry and come down here on double parked. So I'm going, now what? So I run down. You got to sign for the pinball machine. What? Where did this come from? Mirage Studios. Okay, at that point, everything changes. I run up. We grab people to help. We move. We just shove stuff aside in the middle of production, and we got to get this thing up there. And we get this thing hauled. There's no elevator. We are hauling a pinball machine up winding stairs, down the hallway, around a corner. And of course, it didn't fit in any of this stuff, but we were getting it up there. We didn't care how. And we got it in and we got it set up and we got it assembled and we got it put up. And of course, if you own a pinball machine, courtesy of Mirage Studios, you don't have to put quarters in. And nobody ever did. And we played that thing all the time. We had police officers come by on their breaks just to get a break from everything and play the pinball machine. We had, there are times in the animation industry where times are flush and times are not flush at all.
Sure.
You feel flushed.
Yeah.
And this was a Christmas time. And so we decided rather than be depressed, we would have Poverty Christmas. We'd have people potluck it. We'd set up tables in the hallway and they could come in, they could play the pinball machine. We'd run cartoons on the TV. And Poverty Christmas became a big success. It was a great way to get away from your family get-togethers when they started going south. I'm sorry, I got to go where my boss is telling me, so I got to go put my nose in at the party. And it's just like, thank heavens you gave me this escape. We had the best of times, and a big part of it was that pinball machine. And we also used that pinball machine and in production, because if you were multitasking, it was a slanted surface, but any surface that would hold paper, that's where
Sure.
you did the work.
Yeah.
And so that pinball machine was part of our art supplies right there too. But then when you needed a break and you just couldn't stand to look at anything any longer, you could take a quick pinball break and then get back to it and finish the job.
And this is
We loved it.
the classic old school pinball machine where April's on the
With
cover.
the pizza in the center to
Yeah.
really screw it up. Yes.
Yeah.
That
Cool.
was the spoiler, the spinning pizza to spoil it up. Yeah, this is classic pinball. Classic pinball.
You know, Beth, my last question for everybody is always who's your favorite turtle? I know it's Donatello, but why is it Donatello?
He thinks. Um, I'm not the computer expert by any means that Donnie would be. I would be going to Donnie. Donnie, now what do I do? But he thinks his weapon is just a simple staff, but he knows how to use it. I'm not going to say he's the kinder, gentler turtle, but his personality of being um he doesn't flail with the flail. He doesn't have the nunchucks. He doesn't have the blades. Um okay, I do. I have like three ninja toes. I love them. But he doesn't have the size, which are I love Raphael, but Raphael would be the only one that would be dealing with the hardcore, difficult, most challenging ninja weapon, which is the size. Because to turn them 180 degrees, flip them, that is hard. And everybody says it, and they weren't kidding. It's just a simple staff. It's just a simple walking staff. And something about his mind and his tool has always appealed to me. I just love Donnie. And to find out that Donnie reflects Pete, that didn't hurt either. So there you go.
Beth, this is a huge pleasure. Thanks so much for talking to me. I appreciate it. This is great.
I've loved it. I've loved it. Kenny said it would go like fast as lightning. He wasn't kidding.
We and Kenny went forever. I think we ended up talking about Jack Benny for like 35 minutes in the Turtle podcast because we're both big Jack Benny fans. But yeah, he and I
Well,
for a long time.
I kept the horse part to almost a minimum.
That's great. Beth, huge
But
pleasure
thank
meeting
you
you, and
so
thanks.
much for asking me to do this. This is
Oh my
really
gosh, no, my
special.
pleasure.
Thank you. I loved it.
Take care. Good meeting you.
Good meeting you too, sir. Have a great day.